This is a Catholic church. No, seriously, look.
That was wild.
In this video, I'm going to take you inside a Catholic megachurch, sharing some wild mashups like the one you just saw, where an elderly Monsignor walks out on stage to elevation worship. Get ready for altar boys with backstage headsets on, Latin chant, a full cafe, and so much more. I'll take you inside, share my experience, and then ultimately whether I found this cringe or compelling. And hey, if you're new, my name's Austin. This is Gospel Simplicity, a place where I seek to find beauty, truth, and goodness in the Christian tradition. If you enjoy this video, consider hitting subscribe, or if you really like it, go to patreon.com/gospelsimplicity to help see more of these videos happen. Now, I'll be honest, the first question I had going into this was, what do I wear? I hate being underdressed, which would probably surprise you given my general attire on this channel, but I really had no idea what to do here. Like, look, I knew the playbook for going to a Catholic church. I knew the playbook for going to a megachurch. But what do you do when you put those things together? I mean, do you go polo, button up, trusty black t-shirt? I didn't know. I ended up going with a polo. No, not that one. And said, we'll see how it goes. Now, I first heard about this church when I got a email from the contact form on my website, and someone was saying, dude, you've got to check this out. It's Church of the Nativity in Timonium, Maryland, not too far from you. You'll have a wild time. So I said, sure, why not? And when I went to the website, I was really intrigued because this looks like any other non-denominational church, except it's Roman Catholic. I had to figure out what was going on here, but even after the research I did, I still was unsure what to expect when I got in the car to go.
Here's the thing, I have no idea what to expect here. I grew up in megachurches, but I've never been to a Catholic one, so we'll see.
As soon as I pulled into the parking lot, I knew this was going to be interesting.
Okay, so first kind of just interesting thing is that I've only ever had like parking attendants, you know, the guys in the vests with the batons that are waving you to the spot at like a mega church, right? When I go to a Catholic church, like you just rock up and you park, there's plenty of parking, you park on the street or whatever. They've got like a whole parking team here. This is interesting.
When I walked in, two things caught my eye. First, like any good megachurch in America, there was armed security, which I get it, but it always feels weird. The second thing, though, was really intriguing. Just off to the left, there was a group of people standing with a teleprompter and some lights who were getting ready to do live stream video announcements, which I'd seen before in megachurch, but even having seen the website and the parking attendants, I wasn't ready for that. Now, I got in a bit early, so I wanted to kind of scope it out a little bit. And I checked out the cafe, which it looked like it was usually fully stocked, but before the service, it was not too busy there. This was a Saturday night, though, and I got the impression that this place would be rather busy in one of its many Sunday services. And in fact, after the service, they had Chick-fil-A and pizza there, and like any good megachurch, they had books from their leadership on sale that you could buy, which is interesting. After initially looking at the auditorium from downstairs, I noticed that there was a balcony. I thought, I'm going to head up there, get a good angle for this service, and hopefully not be too distracting as I try to take some videos. Before the service started, they ran the announcements, which, sure enough, were live streamed from out in the lobby. But with 60 seconds to go, I got one of the first interesting mashups. They went from these kind of live, energetic announcements to a 18th century painting of Jesus for a time of reflection as the lights dim. And then, after this 60 seconds, out comes the band playing elevation worship. A little bit of a whiplash, but interesting. The mashups and whiplash didn't really end there, though, because right after this initial song, you have what I showed you at the very beginning, this elderly Monsignor, which is a priest, come out on stage, trailed by altar boys who luckily had taken off their headsets by this point, and they're kind of bowing before the tabernacle there where they keep the reserved sacrament, and the band is still playing, and it's just really odd seeing these two things coexist. Meanwhile, the stage is busy with camera guys mulling around with kind of full stabilizer rigs as they live stream this whole thing for their, I guess, rather large audience. At this point, I'm really intrigued, kind of, where is this all going? I mean, for a second, I was wondering if this was going to feel like a mass at all. But sure enough, every part of the kind of Novus Ordo Mass, which is the Mass which came out of Vatican II, kind of mainstream Mass you're going to find all over the world, was there. I mean, from the readings to the Kyrie. no part of the Mass was missing. And honestly, with everything on the screens, I think for the first time in my life, I nailed all the congregational responses, so pat on the back for me. Now, one of the really interesting things was that this priest did give a homily, but it couldn't have lasted more than maybe 3 minutes total. And the communion was also done super efficiently, with altar servers everywhere, including up in the balcony where I was, and there was no passing of the plate for an offering. There was, in typical megachurch fashion, just a number on the screen that you could text to give. In about 40 minutes or so, the Mass was over. But the church service, and yes, you heard that distinction correctly, was not. You see, just when they're saying the Mass is over, go in peace, the screens go back up, the lights fall, and we've got more video announcements. And they're calling for the kids to go to kids ministry with this.
Well, then what are we waiting for?
Nothing. Turn around right now and look for the ministers with the lights. They're so excited to lead you to the theater and bring you back here when we're finished.
So come on, we can't wait to see you today.
Then things got really interesting when some seemingly random dude, to me, walks up on stage complete with his touchscreen TV and gives an exegetical sermon that could have passed with flying colors in any non-denominational church. All of a sudden, he's teaching on the dry bones passage in Ezekiel for their current sermon series, and he's unpacking the Hebrew and talking to the people about how they, like in this passage, need to have the breath of God in them so that they can live switched on lives in their faith. I mean, he's talking about the mission trips that the church does, his 8 kids, and then he's saying that they, as a congregation, need to live switched on. And what does that look like? Well, in typical megachurch evangelical fashion, being switched on means serving in church, giving of your resources, and engaging your friends and neighbors with the gospel so that you can change the world. And I'm sitting there like, where am I right now? This whole thing is so bizarre to me. Like, have I been transported to the non-denominational church down the street? Like, is this a different, like, what is going on here? But no, sure enough, this is what they do. I had to go back after the service to look at the leadership team of Church Nativity, which frankly is huge. It looks like a giant staff. Try to figure out, like, who was this guy who was teaching? It's Tom Corcoran, who is the co-author of all those books that you saw earlier with Father Michael White, who's the pastor. Tom seems to be associate to the pastor, and I guess he's some type of teaching pastor, but he also leads the Rebuilt ministry, which he talked about a bit in his sermon, which is all about rebuilding parishes across the country. And anyway, really charismatic guy. I'd love to know more about him. He seems like he definitely could have been a Protestant at some point. Maybe he wasn't, but he had all the marks of a classic Protestant pastor. I mean, even on his screen, he like had the Andy Stanley standard like Helvetica font within the yellow highlights. Anyway, really interesting to see how this all works together. And I did get the sense that this exact format was a little bit different. I think they always teach a message series, but for the summer, maybe the exact format of it was slightly different because they said we're now in our summer format, whatever that means. In any case, within 30 minutes, his sermon is wrapped up, the band is back on stage for a closing song, and I'm leaving wondering what has happened. But just in case I had become convinced that I had not actually been in a Catholic church, that something was wrong on the website this whole time, no, on the way out, I am handed a Pope Leo XIV prayer card to remind me, yes, indeed, this was a Catholic church. So after all that, like, what do I make of this? I'm going to be honest with you. I went into this expecting to hate it. Look, I'm a nerd who makes videos about historical theology. It's basically my job to be a liturgical and theological snob. I mean, what else are my degrees good for? And yet, something hit me during the readings that surprised me. You see, I was there on the Feast of Pentecost, which is the day in which the church remembers when the Spirit descended upon the believers and people from all over the world of various nationalities began hearing the gospel in their own tongues. Sitting there, reflecting on that moment of people from all over the world proclaiming the gospel together and hearing it in their own way, I wondered, could this not be a continuation of that? Look, I love a traditional liturgy as much as anyone, but clearly not everyone does. And something else, importantly, seemed clear. God was at work in this congregation. I was introduced to Catholicism through the Latin Mass in one of the most stunning churches in America. The very foreignness of the experience and the reverence of it spoke to me in a way that my non-denominational background really hadn't ever done, and I felt a longing to experience more of this. Even though I didn't end up becoming Catholic, I couldn't deny the beauty. This at Church Nativity, though, on the other hand, felt familiar. And part of me wanted, and maybe still wants in some ways, the church to feel different. That's kind of the allure of the Catholic Church for me, after all. Like, that is not what I'm used to. But reflecting on Pentecost and the idea of Catholic, which does mean universal, after all, I wondered if this could be an expression of that universality. Not the only expression, but one way in which the gospel could be reflected for people in this time and place. Throughout the history of the church, as the gospel spread, it encountered new culture and was encountered by these cultures. Both the people who accepted Christ and the church always came away from those encounters transformed. I don't mean to say that the church is an entirely malleable thing that can be relativized by time and place without any consequences to its truth. I do mean to say, though, that the church's expression of what worship looks like is a dynamic thing that is shaped by the gospel and the culture. This is both just the way things have been as like a historical fact, and I think just the way things are generally. And maybe a church like this is one way that can happen. In fact, maybe this is actually a better, more controlled way for it to happen. I mean, here's the thing. Look, the non-denominational church movement isn't new. I mean, we're several decades into this, and it's been on the rise during that time. Whether you like it or not, don't let this echo chamber of the internet fool you. People are still going to it in droves. It's attracting people. I'm guessing the biggest church, most probably vibrant church in your area has this format. But here's the thing. When it is influenced too much by a sense of pragmatism and it has no guardrails and all it wants to do is be relevant and cool and reach people, it can go off the rails a little bit. It can get a little weird. It can go a little too far because it has no real rooting or mooring to something that tells people look, pump the brakes here, guys. But in this context, in the Catholic Church, where I didn't expect to find it, it does have guardrails in place. There's no throwing out the creed or communion. All of it is there. But it is reimagined in a new context. And honestly, as surprised as I was, I kind of found it more compelling than cringe. Look, that's not an unqualified commendation, though. Look, if I became Catholic, is this where I'd go to church? I mean, probably not. But then again, there's a lot more former Catholics who might be open to an invite here than they would be to go to any other parish down the street, even if it has a great liturgy. Fact is, most people aren't walking around thinking, I need more Gregorian chant in my life. You lovely people are, and that's why I love you, but you're weird, and that's okay. The fact remains there's a lot of people who enjoy this type of thing, and that's not the worst thing. One thing I will say about this church in general is that it's not a place that feels sacred on its own. Walk into an empty cathedral, and it almost feels better without people in it, right? You have this sense of awe, of reverence. You feel small and you get quiet, and it feels sacred all by itself. Walk into this church on a random Tuesday, and you're not going to get that sense. Walk in there on a Sunday, though, and see kids who love being in church, see people kneeling before Mass, watch people meet up with their small group who they talk to throughout the week, and see the impact they're having on the world, and, well, maybe that you might call sacred. And my plea to those watching would be to take a pause here, take a breath, right? Because I know that a lot of my audience is going to look at this and with a roll of their eyes be like, okay, boomers, you're about, 30 years late on this trend, and please would you just stop trying to be cool and let us stick with our Latin Mass. Look, I get it, but before we write it off, let's remember there's more to church than the aesthetics, and we're also not a representative sample of what the church is. During this particular service, one moment that stood out to me was they played a highlight reel. This was kind of in between, I guess, the Mass and the service. And they were showing kind of the highlights of a conference they had hosted just that week, the Rebuilt Conference, in which hundreds of priests and hundreds more just faithful attenders and church leaders showed up to see what was going on at this church and to reimagine a church with fresh life breathed into its bones and to wonder about what that could look like. And will it work? I mean, will they meet their goal of what they said in the homily of they wanted to see 250 churches renewed by this vision and movement? I mean, maybe. Who knows? But what if it did? Like, what if this really happened? And what if more ex-Catholics came back to church because of it? More people encountered Christ and more communities were changed through churches like this, who evidently seem to be reaching a whole lot of people. I mean, would it be so bad that it happened to be in a liturgy that wasn't your preference or my preference, even if it still maintained all the parts of that liturgy? I, for one, would have to say, praise God if that happened. And I hope that all of us can, whether you find the music choice or the specific layout of the building cringy or not. To me, this is a real evangelical Catholicism. Would I still disagree about some of their doctrines? Absolutely. But I couldn't help to see the people in there as not only brothers and sisters in Christ, but also people who were serious about making the gospel the center of their lives. And in a time when only 44% of Catholics say that religion is very important in their lives, and only 15% of Catholics who are raised Catholics as kids will grow up to be faithful practicing Catholics, I mean, maybe it's not the worst time to ask hard questions about whether the current way is actually working. As I look ahead at the future of the Catholic Church, and admittedly I do this as an outsider, I really see two viable paths ahead. And I'd argue that they might be able to coexist more than we would think. As I've already mentioned, look, I love a Latin Mass, and it doesn't even have to be in Latin. I just love a reverent, serious Mass where it feels like the people are actually taking this all seriously, like that what we're doing matters, that every detail matters, and that we're in the presence of a holy God. Like, that's something that I want to be a part of. I also can appreciate, though, a liturgy, if you can call it that, where the overall sense is of a forward-leaning congregation who's ready to change the world and where excellence is prioritized in all the details. And that's a key point of the success of the megachurch movement, I think, is that everything is done with a laser focus on doing it well. Now, can this be kind of taken too far? Absolutely. But it does create a culture of, I want to be a part of that, right? Like, when you see things done well and taken seriously, it's something that stirs in you that says, like, ooh, like, let me sign up for that. The key thing that runs between both of these is that there is a seriousness to it. Now, there are different senses of that word, right? One is serious in the sense of, like, this is sacred space and we're on holy ground. And the other is serious in the sense of the gospel is too good to keep quiet. And we need to do all we can to reach our neighbors and the world. Both are serious and both are things that you want to be part of. I'd contrast this with this kind of like middle way, which I don't think is compelling for anyone. And I'll be honest, I never fully got the hate that is kind of poured on the typical expression of the Novus Ordo in the US because I'd never really experienced it. My experience of Catholicism had always been urban in old churches with beautiful liturgies, whether Latin or not. But not too long ago, I went to a confirmation service in a suburban parish that had the aesthetic and architectural appeal of a public middle school, and the service was done in a way that was just, bleh. Like, here I am watching these like 40-some high school students get confirmed in the Catholic faith, this moment that should be really big, and like, I'm just wondering, do any of them take it seriously? Like, everyone seems bored. The music is stuck in this weird middle place of it's not like this old school hymn, but it's not new music that kind of is relevant in that way. It's like 90s, early 2000s hymns that are trying to be cool because now they have an electric bass, but they also have an acoustic guitar that's strumming out of rhythm and a couple old ladies singing off key. And it's just like, I love church, and I was still like, get me out of here. Like, I don't like this. And I can't help but think, like, yeah, no wonder there's like vocations crisis for a myriad reasons, obviously. But if I'm a young person, like, is that what I want to give my life to? Like, it doesn't feel like anyone's taking this seriously or that it's done well or that it's all that important. And it's kind of just like, no big deal. It's just church. But in either of these other two options, whether it's the serious reverence of a more traditional liturgy or this sense of like, we have the good news, let's go change the world, like, both of those seem like things to give your life to. I think that's what the church needs, especially today. So yeah, in conclusion, I expected to hate this, but it was actually kind of interesting to me. It was kind of compelling. I won't be going there, but I'm glad that it exists. And I'll honestly be on the edge of my seat, watching to see whether the movement that this church seems to be trying to perpetuate, if not start, succeeds. And if it does, I'll be cheering them on.